Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host with the moster, Dusty O'Connell, and joining me, as per usual, to my internet left, is our in-house useful human and Vikings blogger extraordinaire, Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
I'm good. How are you?
I am better now. Let's put it that way. I've been horribly sick lately, which left me mostly voiceless, to the benefit of some and detriment of others. But I'm coming out the other side.
Facebooking about tea. It's been like your passion recently.
Well, yeah, I drank like 4 gallons of ginger tea, and I've discovered that green Szechuan peppercorns, like the ones that make Szechuan food like numbing, are an amazing addition to tea because they're an instant sore throat cure that lasts for 7 minutes.
Sense. Yeah.
So as long as you just drink tea all the time, you feel pretty good.
Oh, that's
joining me, I guess, further to my internet left, depending on your approximate relation in St. Paul to Arif in Minneapolis. Also, Minnesota Vikings blogger extraordinaire. I imagine also a useful human, although I think we've guaranteed that title to Arif for as long as he is on the podcast. At any rate, you've probably read a lot of his work on the Daily Norseman, and if you're on Vikings Twitter, then you know him well. Eric Thompson. How you doing, Eric?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on way past my bedtime.
Past all of our bedtimes. Well, except for Arif, who literally, this is like, he just woke up, so.
Yep, exactly. He just got his morning coffee.
Bedtime is a fungible concept to him. I did want to take a second and say thank you to everyone who has contributed to Norse Code in the past, whether it be a one-time contribution at paypal.me/NorseCode, or especially those who have become recurring monthly contributors at patreon.com/NorseCode. All the contributions that our listeners have made go to doing things like keeping the lights on, making sure we can continue to issue new and existing episodes of Norse Code to you, keeping the website alive, keeping Arif interested so he doesn't just continue riding the rocket of his career into the sky and away from us lesser peons on the ground, and so on and so forth. It's not like we bribe Arif to stay here. I don't think we can quite afford that yet.
A really poor bribe. If not that I don't appreciate the contributions as well, but we broke down. It's 69 cents an hour, which is #nice.
Nice.
I just like the way you worded it, keep Arif interested, as I'm just going to wander off in the middle of a podcast were it not for the Patreon contributors.
Or just start tweeting or something, yeah. If you want better bribes for Arif, then please consider a contribution in any dollar amount you would like, although we suggest about $3.50. Skip the latte this month, and keep our own useful human around so that we can continue to deliver you the kind of digital multimedia content that you have grown accustomed to over the last 4 years. From your friends here at the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, Norse Code. I think that was every buzz phrase. I think that was a pretty tight promo.
Covered all the bases.
I think you hit them all, yeah.
Nice. All right, so we've got Eric Thompson here. Eric here is famous for his performance during the last World Cup, where wasn't it you that correctly predicted 2 major upsets?
Yeah, I did pretty good predicting. I don't think I got the final right, but I got a couple of the sleeper teams, at least into the knockout rounds, correct.
That's true. You were high on Costa Rica.
Well, you got Chile, right?
I was on them. Yep. I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, it feels like forever ago, maybe just because I'm so enamored with the fact that the U.S. men's team has a really good chance of not making this next World Cup. So it seems like forever ago that they had a decent performance in the last one.
I know, we were all so excited for that, and it was just I don't know. Now they're such a nothing burger. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, they got Christian Pulisic and a whole bunch of nobodies right now.
I'm hearing great things about the Pulisic kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's scoring in the Champions League. I didn't think Americans were allowed to do that, so it's I mean, and he's I think 19 or 20 years old, so the future's bright for him. They just need a couple of teammates to help him out now.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, if only they could find them. Well, we brought you here this week because there's a flurry of free agent activity happening surrounding the Vikings, and a couple of good signings and a bunch of either non-signings or players leaving the team. And we wanted to get kind of your opinion on, I don't know, I guess most, if not all of them. So maybe we'll just dive right in and talk about the first major signing that the Vikings had, offensive lineman Riley Reiff.
Yeah, so I imagine, Eric, that this signing means that the Vikings are awful and doomed, and that Rick Spielman's a bad GM, right?
Well, of course, every move that they've made so far in the offseason, and every offseason, I mean, it's an annual tradition for Vikings fans to get completely mad about who the Vikings didn't sign and all these really super important players that they let go. And then by the time the draft comes around, they're usually back okay with Spielman because he pulls off a couple fun trades. He's going to be a little handcuffed in that latter part this year without the first-round pick, but yeah, I mean, these weren't giant splashes of free agent signings. These guys, Remmers and Reiff, weren't exactly the cream of the crop of the free agent tackle class, but they also came at a much more affordable price where they still have a little bit of wiggle room to make a couple more moves down the road if they want.
Yeah, well, so I'm kind of curious about the hand-wringing about Riley Reiff. So I understand, like, the Mike Remmer stuff, you know, in some of the big games that have been broadcasted nationally, he's looked pretty poor. He used to be at Vikings camp, couldn't make the team. I kind of understand why people are upset with that, but the Riley Reiff one, you know, doesn't really make as much sense to me because I'm not sure what the alternative is. There was a couple of alternatives at right tackle, especially the Ricky Wagner one everyone wanted, but what was the plan at left tackle if it wasn't Reiff?
The only other real option that you had was Matt Cleo, and I think Vikings Twitter would have absolutely exploded if the Vikings gave him the contract the Panthers did. Now, of course, more of the details have come out about Cleo's contract, and it's more or less, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is kind of a one-year tryout before the bigger money kind of kicks in. But I think if you give me the option just straight up between the two, I think Reiff is the better option. And unless you're going after these, a couple of the big names that got snatched up right away, like Whitworth, I really don't think there was a whole lot of other directions the Vikings could have gone. So yeah, the hand-wringing was kind of inevitable, but it's with how if there was just one position that the Vikings need to fill with the cap room they had, then maybe you throw that kind of Whitworth money at them and or you go, for the $12 to $13 million a year range, which is what kind of the top of the line left tackles are going for. But with so many holes on the line, they had to get at least two, and they probably need to make another move either in the draft or in free agency just to kind of get a quasi-starting five rounded out right now. So, yeah, it's something that, of course, we all have our wish list, but it just wasn't really reasonable to expect more than a player of Reiff's caliber, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think when we think about it in terms of like the opportunities that the Vikings may or may not have missed out on, I think it feels kind of truer at right tackle just because we knew that the Vikings were at least a little bit in on Ricky Wagner. But there weren't really a ton of right tackle options either. I mean, you're left with like, hey, maybe you convert Ryan Clady back to right tackle. Maybe the guy that wasn't good enough for the Seahawks, Bruno Giacomini. Bring Andre Smith back. Like what? Yeah, I don't know what the answer is if everyone is angry at these two tackles.
Right. It present a better option if you're going to be upset, I guess. And that's of course people have these pie in the sky. Well, we should have just signed all the top of the line people. If they signed two of those, that eliminates basically the entire cap. You barely have room to sign your draft picks after that. So yeah, I think it's a good kind of middle ground. And I think the goal for the Vikings on the offensive line, I've been saying this since the offseason started, is I think the goal this year at least, you have to get from an abject disaster to below average, and then see what this offense can do with the weapons they have. But just to make it serviceable, I think that should be the ceiling of the goal for this year. This is a 2 to 3 year process revamping this entire offensive line as bad as it was in 2016.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And then also I think that a lot of people, I know that, the response I've been getting to saying, well, this is basically acceptable, because no one's throwing parades, for
right.
Remmers. And we're not like trying to like pump up the team. We've both been pretty critical of the moves they've made in the past. But when I've been saying like, these are acceptable moves, they bring the Vikings offense up to along in conjunction with whatever plan they'll have at guard maybe. They bring the Vikings offense up to something manageable that allows the team to either take advantage of how good the defense is or take advantage of the fact that Sam Bradford finally has a little bit of a pocket or something like that. And the response I've been getting to that is that we're settling, like that our standards aren't high enough. The team should always strive to be the best as possible. Which it sounds really good on a business card, but I don't really know like how applicable that is to like free agency when the cap is like a finite resource.
Exactly. If the goal is to get the best players available, of course, yes, throw all the money at all the players. But of course, you can't do that in the NFL. And especially with the Vikings, with the cap room they had, they were towards the lower end of available cap room heading into free agency. So I'm sure they went after the Wagners of the world, and they probably talked to Whitworth and tried to work out something with him. But they just simply got priced out by other teams that had more money to spend.
Yeah, and I think that if we take a look at some of these other deals, I think that the Vikings might come out a little bit ahead. For example, I think the Russell Okung deal, I think, is really bad for the Chargers. Okung played, I think, worse than Reef did last year, and Reef was playing out of his, what I guess I would call left tackle his natural position, although like he's always been branded as a right tackle. He's always played better at left tackle. But Okung played worse than Reef did last year, and Reef wasn't even playing the position that he's good at, and he's getting $2 million more a year than Reef, and he has like the same amount guaranteed and stuff like that. I mean, there's some deals the Vikings avoided that I thought was pretty good of them to do.
Yeah, and of course we had to fill the quota of South Dakota guys that went to the University of Iowa. We were 3 whole days without that, so it was just a natural fit.
I know I was hurting.
Yes. Well, of course you were. I mean, I'm sure you had a candlelight vigil and held in a private ceremony, and you and Chad probably went out for dinner after you announced his retirement and all that fun stuff. But we had to move on. Now we got our Iowa guy from South Dakota back because now we're just basically we're East Dakota with all these South Dakota guys that have gone through it. Because did you guys see that tweet? There was something along the lines of there have been only like 6 people
it was
from
like 6 and like 4 of them played for the Vikings or something like that.
Yeah, I think 6 people have played 6 or more games in the NFL from the state of that are originally from the state of South Dakota, and 4 of them have played for the Vikings now.
That's great. I love that. Whenever you can get like obviously winning's the priority, but whenever you can get like regional guys in to help you, I think that's way cooler because you don't see that with professional teams anymore.
Yeah, and then it's a lot easier for Chris Thomason to ask their parents because they're close by.
I am really curious what Riley Reif's parents have to say. I think Thomason already got a quote from one of Reif's parents in this free. I already forgot what it was.
He did. In the introductory press conference, he asked their names. That was my favorite part. It was absolutely outstanding. I'd expect nothing less, and I'm sure we'll get plenty of good tidbits from him throughout the season.
Look forward to it. Well, what are your we can't just be like, well, glad they got tackles. What are your concerns about both Remmers and Reif?
Well, I think just the fact that they aren't that top of the line. That what could happen is that they aren't a market improvement over what they have. I mean, I think anyone that you bring in is going to be an improvement, especially when you're finishing the season with T.J. Clemmings at left tackle. You could bring nearly anyone that's in an NFL under an NFL contract and have a sudden improvement at left tackle. But as far as the specifics, I haven't watched. We know Reif from the Lions, but again, he was playing, quote unquote, out of position, probably a different position that he's going to end up playing here in Minnesota. So, but and Remmers, you've already kind of touched on it, just the fact that he was in Vikings camp, and the offensive line wasn't that great when the Vikings let him go. And exactly how much he's improved since then. I think they're both just kind of they're average to above average tackles. And with all the woes that the offense had last year, the concern is you're paying these guys a pretty decent amount of money still, maybe not top of the line money, but the worry is, okay, you got these new guys in, and how much is the line actually going to improve? Because they're I agree with everyone else that is complaining that that part of the team has to improve for the Vikings to have any chance in 2017. So the concern, I think, is just if they're not going to be that much of an improvement, if they're just going to be, if they're going to be on that below average side, and if they still can't figure out the guard position, exactly what they're going to do with right guard and center. I would assume. I mean, what you're hearing, right, is that Berger is going to be the center again next year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the right guard position is still kind of up in the air. And I think we've learned over the last couple of years, having two guys on the side, on either side of the center that complement each other is a really big key to the offensive line working as a whole.
Well, okay, so
I think a lot of people forget about pressure up the center having such a big impact on people focus so much on edge protection, they forget that quarterbacks respond worse to actually pressure up the middle.
Yeah, because even if you're allowing a speed rush on the outside, at least the quarterback has if the center of the pocket is still somewhat intact, at least they can step up and buy themselves some extra time. But yeah, if it's coming up through the middle, especially with a quarterback like Bradford, who we loved his 17-yard run he had towards the end of the season. I don't think that's going to be the norm going forward. So yeah, with someone that isn't a mobile quarterback, someone like Russell Wilson that can buy time, you do need to. I think you need to place a priority on keeping the pressure away from the middle of the offensive line.
Well, so let me just, before we continue, let me just stop and take a moment, because one of the big issues last year was the injury thing, right? We didn't leave the season with anything close to the offensive line we started the season with. And I mean, on paper, the Remmers for Khalil situation seems like a good one because we're saving a bunch of money and we're getting a guy with a less fraught injury history, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you think, and also same thing with Reef, how much of that do you think plays into the future? Do you feel like we have an opportunity to maybe finish the season with, I don't know, half of a starting offensive line this time?
Yeah, I mean, just the law of averages with these injuries. It was such a freak season in 2016. The Vikings were actually relatively deep at that position heading into the season. Then you have Lodeholt retiring, you have Khalil getting hurt, you have basically everyone on the line missing time, and I think they ended up with something, at least 7, possibly 8 different offensive line combinations in 16 games, which obviously is bad. And I think compared to 2015, they had the other extreme where they had the same starting 5 the whole time. Granted, that group wasn't that great either, but just having continuity on that line makes a huge difference. I think you saw that with the Falcons this year. They had all their starters throughout the entire season. Again, I don't think they were that great of an offensive line, but having that continuity allowed that offense to click. Of course, they have an incredible amount more of weapons than the 2016 Vikings did on all the skill positions and everything. But again, if they're missing time here and there, that offense probably doesn't operate as well as it did.
Yeah, well, so we talked a little bit about how the Vikings haven't, I guess, addressed the right guard position quite just yet. What do you think the plans are there going forward?
That is a great question, because I know the cupboard's getting kind of bare for free agent options there. I know TJ Lang was a great wish list item, and that would have been, I think, an excellent fit. But again, when you're already shelling out that kind of money for the tackles, paying a right guard what he ends up with, $9 million a year, that is pretty expensive. So it kind of remains to be seen for me. I don't think they have a whole lot of in-house options for that, and I guess I haven't really looked at kind of who's left at the guard position as viable options. So, I mean, the pipe dream is trading up and getting someone of the Forrest Lamp variety. Even though I think he'll still.
That's the name, right? It's Forrest Lamp. Everyone wants Forrest Lamp.
Of course, but I think about 20 other teams that have a pick before the Vikings also want Forrest Lamp. So if they do try, I'd be surprised if Lamp made it past 20 or 25 in the first round. So that's the number one name. But there are still a few. I think as far as the draft goes, at least from what I've seen and read, and the small amount of film I've watched thus far, I kind of like to cram for the draft. But it seems like guard's a little deeper than the tackle options are pretty slim to none in the draft as far as, someone you could plug in and compete for a starting spot right away. At least there's a few other options at guard, but yeah, that outside of the Forrest Lamps of the world, I think it's going to be tough to address exactly what they're going to have as the week one starting right guard right now.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of cramming for the draft because it kind of implies that the way that you're watching college players is also the way that you approached college itself.
Yes, exactly. Most of my computer science tests were, the test was at about 8 o'clock. I'd start maybe 8 o'clock the night before. So I like to treat the draft the same way. All the information is fresh in my head that way.
Yeah, no, it's better, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been looking at these names. I just went to over the cap while we were talking about right guards because I did my homework before the show. And so I'm taking a look at some of these names. Some of them are very familiar, like Brandon Fusco and Vladimir Dukas, who I think is actually signed, but it just is not marked as signed by the website. But the names don't really stand out. There are, of course, people who were great, like Evan Mathis was pretty fantastic a while back, but he might still have something sort of left in the tank. DJ Fluker he's a bust as a first-round pick, but can be maybe an acceptable guard, certainly not somebody that you necessarily trust at tackle. Chris Chester from the Falcons. These are names that are people that I would definitely like if they signed, but you have to make the case for them. Like, you didn't have to make the case for TJ Lang or Ronald Leary or Kevin Zietler or even Larry Warford, who's somebody that I kind of had my eye on. He went for a little bit more than I thought he would too. So, but these other people, you kind of have to make the case for them. That kind of, I think, tells us like kind of how bare that cupboard is. It's not that there are bad options out there and the Vikings were wrong for like waiting on this free agent market, but like there aren't options that like people would necessarily just be familiar with.
Right. The number one thing that could solve everything is just having Mike Harris come back miraculously. But right. I like how a lot of places still have him listed, but it really sounds like he's not going to be playing football anymore, which is really too bad because I think that was an underrated player that we missed last year was just how well he played in 2015, right. And then just to have him pulled out from underneath the team right before the season starts, that's another nail in the coffin of the 2016 offensive line.
Yeah, it feels like it hurts more too because it was a great story, right? Because he was an undrafted free agent for San Diego, was forced to start, played poorly. Norv leaves San Diego. He gets cut. He gets another chance with the Vikings with Norv. A little bit later, and he's forced to play at tackle. Doesn't play so well. Gets to play one game at guard. Plays really well in that one game. I think it was against the Bills, and then he earns the starting guard spot and is maybe the best lineman on the team.
He was probably the most consistent. He really, he didn't have a whole lot of film where it jumped out at you like, whoa, look at him just blocking everything in sight. But he was probably the most consistent as far as not allowing any egregious bad plays. And that, of course, is something we became all too familiar with last year. The only other guard that I've seen kind of kicked around, I don't think Jari Evans hasn't signed anywhere, has he?
No, he hasn't.
Yeah, but he's 33, 34, and if this was 2011, I'd feel a lot better about that signing. But that again, there's not a ton of viable options there right now.
Yeah, one thing that might be interesting, I know that Rick Spielman mentioned really briefly that Mike Remmers can play both right guard and right tackle, which I'm a little worried about opening up that kind of flexibility because, hey, he wasn't so hot at left tackle. Let's maybe just keep him at the one spot he's been good at. But let's assume that, maybe he can play right guard. That probably opens up some flexibility for the Vikings in the draft, right? Like if Taylor Moton falls, and they think of Moton as a tackle more than they do a guard, they could kick Remmers inside, or maybe they think that Moton is a guard and they keep Remmers on the outside, or whatever. Like they like Antonio Garcia a lot. He's probably not a guard, right? There's some flexibility baked in there, right?
Yeah, that's it. Kind of seems to be a staple of the kind of guys that Spielman has gone after. He does like the flexibility. of course, they've had to test that flexibility too. So yeah, the more options you can have at this point with the rebuilding of the line, the better. Obviously, I'd like to see Remmers at his, at the right tackle position where he's been the most successful in his NFL career. But push comes to shove, and he does have to at least try at the right guard position. That is an option, which is a nice option to have, I guess.
Yeah, and then I suppose the same thing could be said about like maybe drafting a center, moving Berger to guard again. So yeah, I think there's a couple more options at right guard than people who are worried about the position are letting on.
Yeah.
And then there's another signing. It was a very recent signing that we can talk about real quick. Dayton Jones from the Packers. You had to get the former Packer in so that Packers fans can continue to make fun of Vikings fans, even though they did secretly want him back. Well, what do you think about the Dayton Jones signing?
Well, I really like the price. I mean, it's a 1-year deal for $3.75, I believe, right? I mean, that's,
it's pretty small.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see. I mean, where do you think? Because coming from a different defensive style and scheme, do you think he's just going to be part of that defensive line rotation? Is he going to play inside out, or do you think they would ever even try him at the outside linebacker position, kind of to maybe as a quasi Chad Greenway replacement?
I think that's pretty unlikely. I know that the interview that he had in the Star Tribune, as well as the post signing phone presser, both kind of intimated that he is really just going to rotate along the defensive line. I'm kind of curious about how they use him, though, even within that context, because, I've been saying, hey, he should be a 3 technique. He should just be a 3 technique. Just let him do that. Let him play the free Floyd role. But, it sounds like, they're going to give him some edge snaps. They're going to give him some inside snaps. And the Vikings, I guess they officially listed him. I just read that in the Star Tribune piece I tweeted out. I guess they officially listed him as a defensive end, which kind of surprised me. But then again, Scott Crichton was officially listed as a defensive end when he was playing defensive tackle. So I'm kind of curious. But I feel like if you've got a player that, you can list at both defensive end and defensive tackle, which the Vikings have had for a long time. You could go back to the last draft where they got B.J. DeBose, or you could go all the way back to people like Christian Ballard and Jimmy Kennedy. There's something there, right, about having a guy who can play defensive tackle and defensive end.
Yeah, especially the way that Zimmer uses defensive linemen. He likes to keep everyone fresh. He likes to rotate in and out and attack from different areas of the field depending on the matchup. So I think it's a great move just simply for how this defense operates along the defensive front, is just having more options and more people to attack the quarterback.
Yeah, and I think if you, I looked at the scouting report that NFL.com had out for him. They said he was scheme versatile. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it is the case. But it seemed like the thing that they liked about him, and the thing that kind of was an issue for him in Green Bay when he's playing along the defensive line, is that, at 285 pounds, it doesn't look like he was willing to add more or was capable of adding more. Certainly he was capable of dropping and becoming a linebacker. Is that he had some issues, holding up, in the run game. And if he does end up becoming a 3 technique and competing with Sharif Floyd for that spot, what do you think wins out for Zimmer, who's emphasized run defense for the past sort of 2 or 3 years? Do you think that Sharif Floyd's injury concerns are going to be so overwhelming that they'd rather try out, Dayton Jones at 3 technique despite, the issues that he's supposed to have against the run? Or do you think that those background injury concerns are only going to stay in the background until, Floyd maybe forces the issue and they're going to play Floyd there instead?
I guess as of right now, I would probably give Floyd the advantage there, just because we know when Floyd is healthy, he can fill that role that Zimmer wants. But of course, every time we mention Floyd, we have to mention his health over these last couple seasons when he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. Hopefully, it's a problem that that we'll have to address in training camp. Okay, hopefully both of them are playing well enough where they are both viable options at that 3 technique. But as of right now, again, we'll kind of see what they have in mind for Jones. But as far as in the middle of the line, I would still give the advantage to Floyd, at least in that role alone. But I guess it kind of remains to be seen where they will put, listing him at defensive end. Like you've mentioned, you have the Crichtons and everyone else that have rotated in both the inside and the outside. But I still like Floyd's fit. And I mean, this is obviously his last chance to get out of the Mike Zimmer, or the Josh Robinson Memorial injury doghouse. So yeah.
Well, so that kind of opens up a conversation. I'm sure we'll have this conversation for the rest of the offseason, but might as well bring it up now. What level of play? Let's say Floyd plays 15 or 16 games. What level of play does he have to play at before we kind of change our mind about whether or not he's coming back? Because I think most Vikings fans and a lot of people who cover the Vikings are pretty confident that Floyd's going to be gone at the end of the year. What level of play does he need to play at, assuming that he's healthy throughout that level of play, for us to kind of change our minds on what we think the likelihood of that is going to be?
Well, us Vikings fans, we never change our minds on players, especially when it comes to injury. Yes, if Floyd can get to basically where he was before he started getting hurt, Floyd, he was a fan favorite of just about. People, coaches and players and fans alike couldn't quit singing his praises just for the impact he made his first couple seasons. It's just just his lack of availability to actually get on the field, and of course, I think probably unfairly, Floyd's original injury this year, it only seemed like it was going to keep him out a couple weeks, and then he got his knee scoped and it set him back. And for some reason, that just rubs, it's completely unfair, but people think, okay, if you're supposed to be back in 3 weeks and you're out the rest of the season, it somehow reflects on Floyd being basically a weak person that couldn't fight to get back in the lineup.
It's on his character. I think a lot of people think of it that way.
Right. It's silly to assume. It's like, he didn't fight back enough. Injuries have setbacks. Just ask Adrian Peterson,
Right. Well, okay, so let's talk also about the swings and misses, right? I think that, people are I think we're more familiar with the swings and misses than we are with the people that they actually signed, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's going back to Whitworth, that was the number one on so many people's, wish list that, he's getting up there in age, but he played so well that the Vikings need to make him top priority because he's going to solve every single problem. And, he definitely would have helped this team. But, again, you get back to what Whitworth got. When you're competing against a team like the Browns, who literally just bought a draft pick because they had so much cap room, it's really hard to compete with. If all things equal, I think that's another concern. I think that, of course, I'm sure we'll touch on our buddy Ricky Ellison here coming up, but just people are getting legitimately concerned about, well, why are all things equal, why aren't these players picking the Vikings, or why aren't these players staying with the Vikings if the offers were pretty similar? Like, for instance, Alshon Jeffrey, he took the 1-year deal with the Eagles to be with NDSU Hall of Famer Carson Wentz. your favorite player. I had to throw that
favorite player. Yeah.
But yeah, that does really seem to be the focus on Twitter and Daily Norseman comments alike. We're focusing way too much on what we didn't get rather than what we have got or what we still could get.
I think that despite ours and collectively Vikings fans, despite our predilection for seeing the negativity in things, which is something that I'm always guilty of. I'm, a super cynic.
Well, it's in our nature as Vikings fans. It's hard-coded into us, yes.
Despite that, inherent feature of who we are, I feel like we haven't had that much of a discussion about, pursuing Alshon Jeffrey and Terrell Pryor and evidently maybe Michael Floyd. The grabbing a guy who would very, very clearly be on track to be the second or first for Alshon Jeffrey, maybe second for Terrell Pryor, maybe third for Michael Floyd, but certainly first, second, or third receiver for the Vikings when they have Laquan Treadwell. Do you think that, and we talk a lot about how, hey, the cap is a finite resource. You have to make these trade-offs. If you get a good player somewhere, you can't get a good player somewhere else. That's kind of how it works. if they're trying to get a good player at receiver to sacrifice a good player somewhere else, maybe at guard, is that a concern that you think that reflects on Laquan Treadwell?
Well, depending on who you ask, especially our buddy Hoodie, it's maybe Treadwell's already been written off, and he's going to be terrible his whole career. I'm still in the wait and see mode. We know Zimmer is notoriously hard on rookies, regardless of where they were drafted. But I think now, especially with the couple of the names that have left the Vikings, I think it kind of snuck up on us that wide receiver might be a higher priority in free agency now than we originally thought, because I think everyone's just so enamored with got to fix the line. We're okay at most of the rest of the positions. We'll talk about running back, I'm sure, but now with what's available still out there in the free agent market, I mean, there's definitely concern when your first round draft pick catches one pass for 15 yards while people like Michael Thomas are ripping up the league. That's a definite concern, and going forward, I think Treadwell's going to have to prove a lot to field and be a contributor. But it is kind of interesting to see. It was like, the Alshon Jeffrey talks, because I think just people weren't prepared that the Vikings were even going to go after Jeffrey. It's like, ooh, this is a pleasant surprise. And then, it happened so quickly that he signed with the Eagles. It's like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't really that big a deal. But yeah, I think looking back on it now, especially because you just saw that run. I mean, that was the first position that in free agency. It was immediate. All these wide receivers started coming off the board, and at a pretty high price for most of them. I think that that wave kind of came and went before a lot of us Vikings fans were kind of mentally prepared to address them.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that going forward. I feel like there's a pretty low track record of success with receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds getting, like one reception their rookie year.
Not a huge sample size either, but yeah.
No, that's true, yeah. I'm kind of curious sort of how that's going to play out. Another kind of aspect of that is that I guess technically the Vikings haven't re-signed Thielen yet. That's probably not a problem. But they also, I guess, quote unquote, lost Cordell Patterson. They clearly had, maybe not clearly, but it felt like they had an advantage in terms of re-signing him. And if they made the best deal, they likely would have gotten him. Like, I think in the case of some of these other signings where, if the Vikings made the best deal, they made the best deal probably to Alshon Jeffrey, and, Jeffrey said no for a couple of reasons. But I think that if they had made the best deal to Cordell Patterson, they probably would have kept him. So I don't know how much they lost because they valued him at less than what he eventually signed for. But, we're talking about grabbing some receivers. Patterson is now, no longer with the team. Do you think of him not being with the team as, I think it's a negative, obviously, for a couple of reasons, but do you think it really speaks to anything with regards to the wide receiver depth?
Well, as far as it's such a tough question to answer with Cordero because he's such an unconventional wide receiver in how we think of it. He has such, he's very Liam Neeson in Taken. He has a unique set of skills that he can kill you with. But I just I never saw him kind of morphing into, the prototypical wide receiver one, like an Alshon Jeffrey, like even Brandon Marshall before him in Chicago. But I think the Vikings kind of had an idea of what they could get out of Cordero. They put the price on him, what they thought they were willing to pay. And I think it was pretty obvious right away, as soon as he hit the free agent market, that there were other teams that were going to pay more for it, and the Raiders ended up doing so. And, I was a little surprised about, it is disappointing just because he is a versatile weapon, and he did kind of come on last year in some pretty unique ways. I think they finally figured out, it's okay, let's not send this guy on 18-yard outs, because that's obviously not his strong suit is route running, but they were getting creative and getting him the ball either behind the line of scrimmage or just handing off, things like that. And of course, you had the whole, what the Packers did with Montgomery. Okay, and the Vikings do that too, but I just don't know exactly to what extent you can utilize Patterson. I think Shermer kind of helped unlock and Turner as well. I think he deserves a lot of credit for using Patterson more creatively before he left. But I guess I can't really disagree too much with the Vikings' decision to kind of hold pat with their certain price that got priced out, just because it's hard to kind of figure out exactly what his value is, because you have to throw the special teams in as well. So I can see both sides of the argument, but I guess personally I didn't think it was a huge loss as far as the Vikings' future plans go. But it does, as far as the depth at wide receiver goes, just the numbers game, it hurts, and now they're going to have to address who is playing behind Diggs and Thielen, and now we're getting Jarius Wright's name back in the mix all of a sudden.
Yeah, right.
He was exiled from day one of training camp. I mean, that was one of our biggest surprises when we were at camp last year. Was, oh wow, Jarius Wright's taking most of his snaps with the two. Oh, I bet he's just rotating in and out, and he never got a sniff of the first team.
Yeah,
but now
I was
all of a sudden
surprised with that too.
Yeah, now all of a sudden he's what is he going to be back catching 40, 50 balls next year? Who knows? But so yeah, as far as that goes, I'm not sure if the Vikings are in a great position depth-wise.
Well, it does open up a question about replacing Patterson. So there's obviously two elements to replacing Patterson. One is, that kick return capability, and there's probably a couple of people in the draft you could keep an eye on. But the second, I think, is a more interesting question, is if the Vikings want to get that kind of player again, because they traded Percy Harvin away, got Patterson to replace him, and at that time, it made a lot of sense for them to be enamored with that kind of player, the receiver / running back, the guy who specializes in, yards after the catch, who has the ability to make people miss and really has like this gifted ability to, once he has the ball in his hands, to create yards, but maybe doesn't have a true position. But since the Vikings have drafted Patterson, not only has Percy Harvin completely dropped off the map, Patterson hasn't done well, Tavon Austin has done really poorly, even the guys that are kind of close to it, Randall Cobb has kind of dropped off. You could even look at like Ty Montgomery, who kind of only worked as a running back and kind of only for 3 games.
Yeah.
Those guys aren't doing well anymore. Do you think that the Vikings will value, those kind of multidimensional weapons? Not that there's many of those in this particular draft, but maybe like Donnell Pumphrey or Christian McCaffrey or whatever. Do you think that they'll value that same kind of player the same way now that we're 4 years removed from maybe the height of that experiment?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see going forward. Like you mentioned, there aren't a ton of players like that. I guess McCaffrey would be an excellent option. I think McCaffrey's going to be an excellent NFL player, regardless of how a team uses him. He can do a little bit of everything. He's got the athleticism, but again, I don't think I'd be surprised if he was around by the time the Vikings drafted, and I can't see Spielman kind of selling the draft farm to pick up someone that is as talented as he is. Like we mentioned, these players without the specific position aren't exactly thriving the last couple of years in the NFL. So it'll be, I guess I would probably assume that the Vikings will replace what Patterson did with a couple different affordable players. I don't think that you can kind of, unless you happen upon a guy in the draft that you do really like for that kind of hybrid role, I think you can kind of just fill in what he does. You can maybe give Diggs a few more of those wide receiver screens. You can give maybe get McKinnon more involved in the passing game. You can get someone in the draft with a little bit of versatility. But yeah, I wouldn't think that the Vikings. This is maybe they do, but I don't think they're going to place too high of a priority on finding a quote unquote Patterson replacement. I think they'll have to look at a couple different places to get what they got out of him, both in the kick return game and in the offense.
Well, the kick return game is kind of interesting because when the Vikings grabbed Patterson, the kick return rules that are currently in effect were not in effect then, and the Vikings have probably a couple of opportunities throughout the draft to find a kick returner like that Carlos Henderson guy from La Tech, the TJ Logan from North Carolina. Also from North Carolina, Ryan Switzer, who's more of a punt return guy, but I imagine he would do well at kick returns. Or, they could just stick Marcus Sherrills back there like they have every time, Patterson hasn't been able to go or whatever. Do you think that the Vikings will, because they've got really scarce resources when it comes to the draft. Do you think that the Vikings will invest like a middle round, late round pick in a kick returner, maybe get a guy in undrafted free agency, or will they look, to the roster and say, hey, we've got Adam Thielen, hey, we've got, Marcus Sherrills, hey, maybe Jerick McKinnon will learn how to return kicks. Like, what do you think will be kind of the investment level for a position the Vikings have had a lot of pride in because they've led the league in kick return average or have been second in like all of the past like 6 to 8 years? Do you think that's something we'll continue to prioritize?
I think so, but I do, remember when Stephon Diggs got drafted, that was kind of, oh yeah, he'll be a great punt returner. That was kind of the ceiling that we assumed for him. So I don't know if the Vikings are going to go after, a certain draft pick based solely on, oh, hey, this guy's a good returner and this is what we want to use, definitely want to use him for. When we do have the other options on the roster. Granted, they probably aren't up to the caliber that Patterson is, but yeah, Sherrills, before he got banged, when he left the punt return team, when he was out this season, there was a noticeable difference. So I think punt returning wise, I think we're still fine with having Sherrills back there. But as far as kick returns, like you touched on, it is a slightly less vital part of the game just because all the different rule changes they've made. Whether it's a lot more touchbacks because they moved it up, or now that with the touchback rule going to the 25, there's a lot of basically trying to kick it, with a higher arc and going to the goal line and basically giving returners less room to work with. So I guess I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Vikings spend a mid to late round pick where they have that in mind, but I don't think they'll have the kick returning in mind, but I don't think they'll have that, I don't think that'll be the sole reason why they draft a player, just because they don't have a ton to work with right now in the draft itself.
All right, well, let's talk about the defense real quick. So Captain Munnerlyn signed with the Carolina Panthers. He's probably the biggest free agent loss for the Vikings. I thought that he played, excellently last year, better than even his PFF grade, which is pretty generous. And as a slot receiver was a pretty big part of, how the Vikings defense, did well in the game that they in fact did do well in. He's gone. What do you think the plan is there? Do you think it's just to have Mackenzie Alexander stand up, or do you think that hey, we re-sign Newman? Newman can maybe play a lot of inside slots, kind of like Antoine Winfield, and have Trey Waynes play on the outside. Like, what do you think is the plan going forward there?
Well, I'm not 100% sold on the just kind of plug and play with Mackenzie Alexander at the nickel corner, just because I think just his skill set alone is probably still better suited as an outside corner. And again, what he did play last year, he was still pretty raw, and I think that Zimmer kind of noticed that right away. I can't remember which game it was where either he got the start or he was playing the lion's share of the snaps and made a couple big mistakes, and then
he got benched.
Then didn't see the rest of the field. So, the Nickel Roby name has been tossed around a lot, and he's still available in free agency. And I think that would be an excellent fill-in as a Munnerlyn replacement, just for the nickel back. Nickel with 2 L's, corner jokes I could make on Twitter. But I think he'd be a suitable replacement. But yeah, as far as free agent losses go, I think the Munnerlyn one is kind of far and away so far what the Vikings have lost. I think he's the most important because, especially with all the 3 and 4 receiver sets that we're seeing from just about every team, especially the teams in the NFC North, you need 3 solid, dependable corners. And I think we're realizing over the last couple seasons that having 3 good outside corners is not the same as having 2 good outside corners and 1 very good slot corner, because it is a different skill set that you need. And Munnerlyn was basically, he's kind of the prototype in today's NFL. He has the closing speed, but he can still, he doesn't have to depend on his size so much to get in the way of wide receivers. He uses really good timing, and he's really quick laterally, and that's, I think, with Alexander, he has a ton of speed, and I think he has the quickness to be a slot corner, but I just don't know if he has the wherewithal so far, and just kind of the football awareness to just step in and not skip a beat with that defense, because that of course we know Zimmer's defense is he's the quote unquote DB whisperer, so it'll be interesting to see how they do it, address it. There's a couple options in house, of course, but I definitely wouldn't mind the Vikings either going after someone like Roby or addressing it, even with maybe in day 2 of the draft, if they have, because this is a very corner-rich draft. There are a ton of great options going forward. So they have someone they like, and people might gnash their teeth again if there's still questions about the offense. But I don't think I think we should be under the assumption still that this is still going to be a defense-first team. So with losing someone like Munnerlyn, they better have some sort of suitable replacement just to make sure that this defense can still carry the team when needed.
All right, well, one element of that is the ability to win the field position game. I was kind of surprised that the Vikings did not re-sign punter Jeff Locke, in part because I thought that his final year with the Vikings was pretty good. And I've been one of maybe the biggest critics of Locke as a punter, but he's been pretty good. I don't really trust Taylor Simank. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Or just your punter off the street. Do you think that they'll invest draft that would be a surprise, because I don't think people are talking about it, but do you think they'll invest draft resources in a punter?
Just to give our buddy Mark SP a heart attack, I would love to see that, but it maybe if they I don't see anything other than even a 5th rounder would surprise me, but maybe a 6th or 7th, especially if they gather a couple more in usual Spielman fashion towards the end. I was a little surprised to see that Locke, just because I thought, there were no bigger critic than I was of Locke his first couple of years, but he really seemed to kind of put it together. I think it might have just been the fact moving indoors. I think I commented throughout the season that I love indoor Jeff Locke. I mean, outside of that Dallas game where he really had a couple inexplicable shanks, he had a really good season overall, especially in the games he played indoors. I'm a little wary of myself of we can just find a replacement punter. We'll be fine there. The field position game will be important, especially when you don't have a top of the line offense. You want to put your defense in position to succeed, and when the defense does succeed, you want to have your offense, when the offense doesn't succeed, you want to have them put the defense in better position. So, it's a little surprising. I guess I can't get too bent out of shape with all the other issues on the team that we have. The punters still, I guess, a little lower on the priority levels, but it is something that the Vikings are obviously going to have to address, and hopefully they can find a suitable solution, because it would be unfortunate to make improvements in other areas only to have a punter that constantly puts them in bad field position.
And then right before we head to the mailbag, we do want to talk about this Ricky Ellison thing. What? Yeah, okay. So Ricky Ellison says essentially that the Vikings have toxic leadership, that there's a reason that people are leaving, that there was an injury problem last year with the Vikings because they worked them too hard in practices, which I guess is possible under the new CBA. And I guess, yeah. And if he's right, that's a huge problem, right? If that's the case, and people want to leave the Vikings, not even just not sign, but leave the Vikings, that's a problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the report, if Ellison or Ricky's opinions actually do have validity throughout the locker room and not just He's not pulling the whole, well, we would have gone to state if you would have played my kid more thing. That's it.
It really does feel like that, right?
That's what it smacks of me. And I believe Ben Gessling said it best when, to be fair, a lot of the parents have a very loud microphone here in Minnesota, which is, of course, a little true, probably more than most teams, but it's such a bizarre thing to say. I mean, Ellison, bless him, he got paid by the Giants. I mean, that's a heck of a contract for
quite the deal, yeah.
Yeah, for a blocking tight end. I think he's going to fit in pretty well with the Giants. I think that's a piece that the Giants desperately need, especially if they're going to improve a running game that was battling with the Vikings as the worst in the league all season last year. But unless it comes out a few more times and from actual players and not parents, I can't put too much into it. But it does. I mean, you can kind of see it because there are these players, like we've already talked about, that seems that they've had equal or maybe even a little better deals, offers from the Vikings, and they've chosen elsewhere. So maybe it is. I have a really hard time believing that the practice is quote unquote too hard. So, but maybe that is, if this keeps happening, the best deodorant is winning. If the Vikings get up, if they start winning more games, then you're not going to hear anything about it. Of course, if they, start out 0-5 instead of 5-0 this season, there's going to be, I bet there will be more rumblings from different players or different parents maybe even too. But yeah, I kind of laugh at it right now. Unless we hear more sources come out, I can't give it too much credence.
Yeah, it's something when you read the story, you're just like, well, he's not actually referring to anything specific. He's just posing a bunch of hypothetical questions. Like, why would so many, Vikings free agents leave? And he's at the time he's talking about Matt Khalil, who they didn't necessarily want to resign, and who played with his brother. Charles Johnson was somebody that they mentioned, and that's somebody that the Vikings could have kept if they wanted. By the rule of the CBA, Johnson wouldn't have had a choice if they wanted to keep him because he was a restricted free agent. Ellison got this really generous deal. Again, maybe worth it, but a really generous deal, and had seen basically his replacement on the roster, David Morgan.
Yep.
A lot of the signings at the time, I'm still concerned about the Jeff Locke thing. I don't think the Patterson thing has much to do with this. A lot of the signings at the time are justifiable, but every time you bring up another player and justify why he's gone, at the back of your head, it just kind of adds to that, I think, that level of doubt. And what if he's right? I think that there's not any substantive argument that he would be right because he's not even speaking from specific experience.
Yeah.
But it just feels like, they tried to sign a bunch of people and they couldn't get him. What if he's right?
Yeah, that is the dark cloud of gloom hanging over Vikings fans. But why don't people like us? Why is it the weather? Yeah. So, and people have been either half-heartedly or maybe sometimes seriously, well, what is there really? What's exciting about this team, especially on the offensive end? It's the number one thing why a lot of people have left and why a lot of others haven't signed with the Vikings, it's believe it or not, it's money. I know,
crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, I know. It's weird. It's a lot of players. If you offer them the most money, they'll go. But again,
the worst teams, if you give them the right amount of money, we've seen that in the past 2 years.
The Browns fill out a roster every year, so.
Well,
and they did really well free agency.
Yeah, real well.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but that kind of flies in the face of the story that Dayton Jones tells to the Star Tribune today when he was like, he's in the middle of his meeting and, Daniil Hunter and Linval Joseph are like, oh, yeah, you're going to love the culture. You're going to love the coaches. These guys are technicians. They're great at getting the best out of people. Do you believe Ellison? Or do you believe
what if
Jones?
The offensive locker room is really toxic, but the defensive locker room is just full of life?
I guess fire Mike Zimmer then? No, seriously, that strikes that. Just looking at it in like a bubble, that just seems like really bad upper management.
Yeah, well, so it also speaks to how likely we are to believe a negative report over a positive report. And in fairness, positive reports are like very PR-y and are motivated, and negative reports are just like, well, they wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true.
Well, no, nobody ever writes a BS positive report for a player.
So I think that's part of it. Yeah, I don't know. Like I still don't think it's true. I think that if you wanted to talk about like competing amounts of evidence, probably Jones's evidence is more compelling in a vacuum. But the player who just signed with your team is always going to be positive about the team.
It's right. You can always trick the new guy.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, my whole theory is with why the Vikings keep on getting these Packers free agents, and they speak so glowingly of the Vikings. It's like, oh, I moved from Green Bay to Minneapolis. Well, I won already. It doesn't matter how we do on the field. It's the same kind of weather and the same kind of people, except I can do shit at night. Yay!
Exactly. I'm in the third worst place, which is way better than the worst, you guys. Way better. Way better. But no, I mean, look, we've heard stories from other players about like other teams that have like genuinely toxic locker room environments. Tampa Bay.
Miami locker room. Tampa Bay all the time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like Tampa Bay actually was toxic. Like they had MRSA in the locker room.
Literally, yeah.
Like, how can I don't know. I love Randy Ellison, but I don't really take that much stock in the plight of a player who, on his way out, like shoots a gun behind him. You know?
Yeah, and also I think that like, why didn't other players who were on their way out totally burn the team? Captain Munnerlyn said something benign and then apologized that it might have come off as negative to the team, right? Like he was just like, yeah, it's I don't like the weather, which is fine. Like, I get it.
I apologize.
I wanted to be part of a winning culture, and then people are like, oh my god, he said winning culture. He's like, no, I didn't mean it that way. Holy shit.
Yeah, and he went back to his own team, and Munnerlyn is like, literally, I mean, try to get any of the Vikings beat writers to ever say anything bad about Munnerlyn. I mean, it's impossible. Yeah. He's like one of the greatest interviews. He's one of the greatest guys that's ever gone through the Vikings locker room. So, of course, he's off the hook. I mean, he's not going to say anything bad. But, yeah, this is, right now, it's just the Ellison thing is such an isolated incident. And, again, Patterson basically, he said he was trying to stay with the team. It's just...
Yeah, if Patterson or Khalil, who have all the reason in the world to be upset with the team, or at least all the reason in the world to deflect the frustration on the team, don't, then, I guess chill out.
I agree.
Chillax, bro.
All right, mailbag. Can you stick around for just a little bit longer? I know we've been keeping you long. You've like a job and stuff.
Oh no, I don't need sleep. I have 2 young children. It's fine.
You're used to this, and actually, this is probably less harrying or worrisome than like being up late with your kids. Like at least we will be somewhat reasonable. I can't speak to the mailbag questioners, but at least we will be somewhat reasonable in our counter arguments.
Right.
All right. So
I'd be more than glad to stick around.
Excellent. Tommy Gunn writes in, best estimate on the cap space that will be used for retaining current players. Well, given the stuff we just talked about, less now.
Less now. I think maybe he's talking about extending people like Rhodes or the option for Teddy and Barr. I think so. I don't know. But there's not that many more players to retain. Going into free agency, there were only a couple of players I wanted to retain. I was thinking probably Ellison, definitely Munnerlyn, definitely Newman, and Locke were like the people that I was like most concerned about retaining. And it looks like they're not going to retain those guys. So not a ton of it on free agent retention, but I wouldn't be surprised if they used up a little bit of this extra cap space, especially because they don't have to spend that cap space on a first round pick. They use some of that extra cap space on extending, Rhodes and
I got a question for you. Let me reframe this for both of you. How much of that cap space will be used for Teddy Bridgewater retention?
Oh, hopefully all of it. Can we just say that? Please, if he's healthy, I mean, that I really do. I realize that someone replied to me today. Everyone's so mad on Vikings Twitter just because We all dismiss Bridgewater. That's really what it comes to.
Yeah.
We're still really sad about Teddy. So if he's healthy,
the Vikings announce tomorrow, we have signed a 10-year extension with Teddy Bridgewater.
Oh, it would solve everything. Everyone would be happy the rest of the time. Who cares? We got Teddy for 10 years. Well, I mean, if you listen to Ted, he's still convinced that Teddy's going to be the Week 1 starter in 2017. So, like, hey, I ain't worried then.
I would be ecstatic.
I would be.
A little optimistic.
Yeah, I would be incredibly surprised, but of course that would be outstanding. If we see Teddy Bridgewater anytime in 2017 under center, that would be wonderful.
All right. Well, Arif, anything to add?
No, I just this is a much better conversation to figure out how much cap space the Vikings was. I'm good.
Jeff Swoboda with the multi-million-dollar question: what is Sharif Floyd's trade value?
I think the second part of this question is also: do the Vikings explore Sharif Floyd's trade value because they signed Datone Jones? And I think the answer is no. But I think that his trade value is pretty low. I mean, people always talk about trading high, right? Like, I had a conversation about trading Kyle Rudolph because he had the best season of his career. This is the worst time to trade Sharif Floyd. He had a 1-year contract that cost a lot of money, and he didn't play last year.
Yeah, so you get Jones, and then you get Floyd and Jones to play together for a year, and then maybe you increase both of their trade values.
Well, you can't really increase Floyd's trade value after the year because he's got. Well, they both have 1-year contracts, don't they?
Yeah, they'll both be unrestricted after this year.
Yeah, well, given the nature of the locker room, they're both gone. That's
true. They would probably leave tomorrow if they could.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as Floyd's trade value right now, it couldn't be much lower. That's the problem. So I mean, realistically, what do you think you get? Again, this guy's a first-round pick in his upcoming his 5th season. I mean, you could get a 5th or a 6th or 7th, maybe.
A 5th was what I thought, but maybe it's less just because it's 1 year. Right.
Because you're basically it's a 1-year unless you sign him to an extension, which is also ill-advised given his injury history. So I think hopefully we're having a different conversation about Floyd after the season, and we're all worried about how much we have to pay him.
So we could maybe trade him to Carolina for a 5th and a 6th, is what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah, everyone's going to. The Vikings East, or Vikings Southeast, I should say. That's where everyone's going now.
Well, everything is south from the Vikings, except for Seattle.
This is true.
All right, Zen Cupid writes in, is Datone Jones more of a threat to Floyd or Tom Johnson? I think we just answered that question. I don't know if he's necessarily a threat to either. Probably more of a benefit to Floyd.
I mean, he's probably a benefit to Floyd. In terms of, he's going to be taking snaps from both of them, and Tom Johnson is lower on the depth chart, so I guess him. Yeah,
and Tom Johnson is kind of one of those that he gets fewer snaps, but he kind of seems to make a few more impact plays. So if he's getting fewer snaps, he's Johnson's kind of, again, he's another one that's not great against the run, but he can make a huge impact in the pass rush. So if he has few opportunities to do so, maybe it ends up hurting him a little more than it would Floyd. But again, we don't really know how that snap rotation is going to work with those three.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we could see just a lot of Datone Jones actually at defensive end.
Yep.
Josh Bjork writes in, we can't have Felton or Ellingson, but they keep Zach Line. Why, oh, why?
I would have liked them to sign Felton. I'm such a huge Felton fan. Okay, so here's the thing about Ellison. I don't want to say it that often because, at this point it sounds like sour grapes, and I don't want him anyway. But he hasn't ever been as good as he was his rookie year. He's gotten less good every year since then, which isn't to say he hasn't been a huge asset to the team because he's been super valuable, so I don't want to sound sour grapesy. But I can see why the Vikings would not offer that much to Ellison. I am not a huge Zach Line fan. As a person, he's great. As a story, he's fantastic. I think he could have been a really interesting running back somewhere. But as a fullback, I don't think that he's particularly good. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings attempted to look at a fullback maybe not in the draft, but an undrafted free agency. They also have that converted linebacker from Boise State on a reserve contract. They might have a 3-way fullback competition, and I don't think the line thing is set in stone.
Yeah, and I mean, I think another part of why Ellison's effectiveness declined is kind of when he first came into the league, they used him pretty much exclusively as a fullback, and I think he's a heck of a blocker, and that's kind of where you want to use him. You want him coming out and just basically doing the old cliche, putting the hat on a hat, and he's great at that. And I think when you're moving him around the formation a lot, and maybe just he wasn't as much of a fit in Shermer's offense. But yeah, I mean, line is he's a fullback. Like he's not terrible by any means, but he's not going to be a game changer in the running offense. And I think if he was a game changer in the running offense, you would have seen it this year. And they just didn't utilize it a whole lot. And again, in this offense, how crucial is a fullback? I know having someone like Felton back would have been great, but I think Felton might have been one of those guys that kind of did throw a little bit of shade at the Vikings on his way out, if I remember correctly. I can't. Maybe I'm just making it. I thought he made just like.
I think it was like, I'm happy to go to a team that will use me or something like that.
Basically, yeah.
And he saw a snap count plummet.
Yeah, because he barely got on the field his last season with the Vikings, and it's not like they're using line 50 snaps a game either. So, I mean, I can't get too worked up about it either way. I don't think.
So the answer is we can have Zach Line because he wants to be there.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, because he is there.
Alex Goebel writes, how willing would you be to give Toby Gerhart a shot in training camp this year?
Oh, man, I want to hear Eric's answer.
This is a joke, right? I read this one because I was included on the tweet, and I was like, oh, funny. But if he is serious, this is not a very good chance. And Toby Gerhart is one... You
need a power back, Eric. Come on.
Yes. Well, my favorite Toby Gerhart comparison was to Slowbro. That was my someone in the Pokemon craze last summer. Whoa. Someone caught a Slowbro and named it Toby Gerhart. I was absolutely dying. It was so great. But and Toby, this is another one that, as a person, was one of my favorite. He was one of my first one-on-one interviews. As soon as we drafted him at Daily Mercy, I went and covered an event of his. Couldn't have been nicer. Great guy, but come on, no, I don't see where he would benefit this offense.
All right.
Do you see any benefit, Arif?
I'm not against a camp body Toby Gerhart. I think that Asiata would be a favorite to make the roster over him. I don't know that it adds much. It might detract it in terms of it's a distraction or whatever.
That is the nicest no you've ever said.
What? Okay, so the biggest issue with that, I think, is that in a stacked running back class, you're going to get some really good undrafted free agents. You'd probably rather have those guys as your camp bodies.
I agree.
There you go. The Sports Guy writes in, am I the only Jerick McKinnon truther in the building? If you believe that Jerick McKinnon was complicit in 9/11, then yes. Yes, you are.
I am a huge Jerick McKinnon fan.
Well, okay, so luckily he goes on to... Hold on.
Okay.
He goes on to say, I don't see a need for a lead running back. And then he posts a pretty cool graphic with all the quarterbacks over the last starting running backs, over the last 5 years, and their percentage of runs that ended up over 5 yards. And for Jerick McKinnon, he had 36.28% of runs end up over 5 yards in 2014, 36.54% in 2015, and then last year, the year where the offensive line all died, he went down to 30.16%. So, and that's even with his terrible year, that's 3% off the standard deviation. So it's decent, not terrible.
Yeah. Well,
it wasn't his terrible year either. I thought McKinnon did. he had some definite games where I think he just kind of got gun shy behind that offensive line because
he managed to get approximately 30 over 5-yard runs despite his line.
Exactly. Yeah, it was definitely despite them. And I'm sure Reef will expound on this more because he is the original Jerick McKinnon trooper. But I've been on the boat too. I mean, I think the mistake is, McKinnon can't be an every down back, or you can't give him 60 snaps a game. I think you can give him plenty of snaps a game. I think you just have to be a little more creative in how you give him the ball. If you're expecting McKinnon to line up in the and run between the tackles of the game, I just think that's a silly use of his skills. I think if you can kind of split him out wide, get him in space, he's still one of a great runner. He can catch passes, which is something that the other back in town hasn't done in the entire decade. I think he's a great fit. I just think the Vikings would be best served to kind of find a 1B for McKinnon, someone that can pound the ball between the tackles and isn't named Matt Asiata. I think if you get an upgrade at that complement position, I think it would just escalate what McKinnon can do so much more.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I think that. So I think the thing that I think separates me from a lot of McKinnon truthers is that I think that he can be a lead back, just not an easily defensible position. I'll acknowledge that, but. One thing about McKinnon is that he improved a lot over the course of the year, and I think more than the other running back. In this case, the other running back's Matt Asiata, but than the other running back did. And I think that he showcased, because I think he was struggling with a little bit of injury in the middle of the year. He showcased some really, really good running at the end of the year. So I think that he can do really a lot as a running back, and I think that the way that a lot of us have been, like Eric and I have been talking about running backs as a way to complement McKinnon. I think it's kind of assumed for a lot of us that McKinnon is part of whatever solution they'll have at running back in some capacity. For me, my ideal solution is that he is a lot of it. I think that for the Vikings and for most Vikings fans, I think they're on the same page, actually. I think that most Vikings fans and the Vikings in general agree that you want, a thumper, essentially, a guy you can get it done on third and short. And I'm not opposed to that either. I'm a big fan of some of the guys in the draft that have the ability to complement him. So no, I don't think you're the only Jerick McKinnon truther in the building. I think I am more of a truther. I am more Jerick McKinnon-y than you are.
And second question from the sports guy: do you think Nick Mangold is a necessary signing to solidify the offensive line being top 10 in run blocking and top 15 overall?
I don't think there's a necessary signing at this point anymore. I think that the Vikings have a lot of options, and I think that if they, miss out or don't want Nick Mangold, they still have a lot of opportunities to make it a fairly good or okay run blocking line.
And yeah, I mean, if you could guarantee me that signing Nick Mangold would make the offensive line top 10 in run blocking and top 15 overall, sure, yeah, I'll absolutely take that. But I'm not sure you can guarantee that with Mangold, and he just. I think the similarities between him and Berger are so close. I just don't know how you really differentiate the two. And I still think the price tag on Mangold is going to be pretty high for what a lot of the other options that we've already discussed that you can do with the offensive line.
Well, and in the words of the great postmodern philosopher Bender, I can guarantee you anything you want.
Yes.
Right.
Austin Medizian writes in, who will have the next retired number? Is Moss deserving, or is that ship already sailed? And then he suggests Adrian Peterson as the next candidate.
I feel like long-term I'd understand if it was Adrian, but it really in the short-term feels kind of, no way.
He's got to be,
Moss.
You have to leave in order to come back.
Yeah. I think we got to cleanse our palate of, recent Adrian Peterson before we have that discussion. Moss, I would love, to the extent that retiring jersey numbers is a good idea. I think that Moss is very deserving of it, and I was upset. I didn't mind the Patterson, draft pick or the massive trade to get him, and he got 84, and I was kind of upset. I wanted that to be Moss's. So from personal feeling alone, I think that he's going to be the next jersey to be retired.
Yeah, I think he's probably the best candidate, and because when you think 84 Vikings, even with the popularity that Patterson has enjoyed for the beginning and the end of his Vikings tenure. It's still weird to see the 84 on anyone else but Moss. He's such an iconic player. I've really enjoyed this, especially over the last year or two, this renaissance of all these people just randomly posting Moss highlights, and I think Moss just celebrated, was it his 40th birthday? Or I don't know, whatever occasion it was, I've seen a ton of retrospective Moss highlights, and just the kind of overall appreciation of, holy crap, this guy was amazing. He's such a generational talent. Yes, he came with his warts, but I think that's kind of why Vikings fans are so endeared to him. And as far as Adrian Peterson goes, I mean, Latavius Murray wears 28 too, so he'll probably just hop right into that number. Probably by tomorrow. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, we're going to have a new 28 anyway.
Don't.
Dude, some people are going to be so upset. Like, I saw a couple of people be like, well, he can't wear 28. I was like,
Don't. Well,
yeah, I mean,
if you
it's.
Go ahead.
I think time is going to smile favorably on Adrian Peterson. But yeah, like Arif said, right now it seems weird to consider it, but I mean, he was the best running back in the NFL and one of the best pure runners of the ball of all time for over a decade. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely a candidate, but right now it just feels a little awkward.
Is there any chance that like one of the other players from the like power era of the early 2000s who was not maybe like a generational talent in the same way that Randy Moss was gets their number retired first, like Robert Smith or Randall Cunningham or something?
I don't see that happening.
No, just the longevity. I mean, especially Cunningham. He had basically one magical year. That was it. I believe even in '98, wasn't Brad Johnson the starter at the beginning of the season?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we went through like a run of quarterbacks that were very good, but only after they had taken over for the starter.
Yep, exactly.
So really what we should do is retire Brett Favre's number.
Yeah, definitely.
Just to piss off all the Packers fans.
I actually really support that idea. I would love it if we just like stole that carpet from under. Anyway, Hoodie writes in, is St. Patrick's Day dinner, for those who are unaware, it's corned beef, cabbage, and potatoes, the most overrated holiday dinner?
Oh yeah, Hoodie just wants me to talk about Thanksgiving again, because that
this is clearly Thanksgiving bait.
Very obviously the most overrated holiday dinner.
Oh,
who even rates St. Patrick's Day dinner that highly?
Okay, so
who has dinner on St. Patrick's Day outside of alcoholic beverages? That's my question.
Yeah, right.
I thought the Irish car bomb was dinner.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, well, and breakfast is a Guinness. Yeah, and maybe you throw in.
And then lunch is a green Guinness. Like, yeah.
No, lunch is a green Bud Light, and then and then dinner is an Irish car bomb. Yeah, no, I will go even further and say that St. Patrick's Day is the most overrated holiday.
Oh, that's fighting words. No, New Year's Eve is the most overrated holiday, and it's not even close.
Whoa, ooh, wow, all right. You can find Eric Thompson at Eric_Thompson on Twitter. Don't at me, but St. Patrick's Day is totally the most overrated holiday because it has all the detriments of New Year's Eve with none of the like cultural or like self-development benefits. It's all the amateur hourishness of New Year's Eve without it being a new year. It's just a day in March when everybody... Okay, so you want to hear something really ridiculous?
Yeah, sure, I guess.
St. Patrick's Day is next Friday, right?
Or
this coming Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Guess when Denver had their St. Patrick's Day parade?
Last Saturday.
Last Saturday!
So did Chicago? Yeah, and I live across the bridge from West 7th Street, which is the big St. Paul celebration every year. They shut down West 7th last Saturday.
That is garbage.
What?
It's on a Friday. I guess their policy is to always do it on a Saturday, and it's the Saturday before if it doesn't fall on a Saturday, which is ridiculous. But I did hear all the bars they're kind of keeping up all their tents throughout the week so they can celebrate again on Friday.
Yeah,
so, and I will be there celebrating that wonderful holiday because you know why it's better than New Year's Eve? Because New Year's Eve you have to start at night. St. Patrick's Day you can start at noon.
My argument in favor of St. Patrick's Day not being overrated is Shamrock Shakes.
Also very good.
Yeah.
No, this is both the thing I said and the thing that Arif said are reasons why St. Patrick's Day is super overrated. St. Patrick's Day isn't even that important of a holiday in Europe, where the holiday came from. And
God, it's clearly an American-Irish holiday. You don't have to be like, well, it's not that popular.
Okay, well, where's the American Chinese holiday other than Chinese New Year, which is way better than normal New Year?
I'm not saying that Chinese New Year is not better than, St. Patrick's Day or New Year's Eve.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that McDonald's...
why isn't Easter on the list? That's all I'm saying.
Well, okay. That is another point in my favor. McDonald's appropriated the entire month of March for Shamrock Shakes. And now, all of a sudden, we have this...
You get cheaper fish.
Well, now we have this weird week where all of a sudden every commercial establishment, every bar that gets to profit from selling more Guinness than it will ever sell in literally the other 364 days of the year, or I guess 358 now that St. Patrick's Day apparently lasts a week. They're living the dream. They keep their stupid Guinness tents up, and everybody pretends like they're Irish. And
what's wrong with bars making profits? You work at a bar, Dusty.
Well, yeah, and what's even worse is that I am the ultimate Irish pretender, because even though my name is O'Connell, I was adopted. I'm not even Irish.
Now we've got to the root of it.
Yeah,
okay. That makes total sense.
But as somebody whose name is an appropriation, I am watching this holiday and seeing just it's not even about the European or Irish culture.
So you
it's
have
just
more
straight
authority
up
on it because you're not Irish? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, I like everything else. I look at it from an outsider's perspective, and there is nothing about St. Patrick's Day that is not about parades and drinking, which is fine. I'm all about that. Okay. So
you just named 4th of July.
And
it's overrated.
You know what the best parade? you know what the not most overrated parade drinking party holiday is? Mardi Gras. That's where that stuff
overrated.
belongs. No. Ooh, wow. All right. You can find Arif at Arif Hassan NFL on Twitter. But no, seriously, St. Patrick's Day does not deserve a week. It does not deserve a month. It barely deserves a day. St. Patrick's Day dinner,
that
please.
Day on Friday at right down the street from you.
I will say that there's maybe a chance that St. Patrick's Day is overrated at all, but not the most overrated. Any holiday that I have cause to be okay with or happy with is probably not that overrated.
What holidays offend you?
No holidays offend me. I just don't care about Easter.
Well, but all right. I just feel like as a culture,
if I had children, maybe I would have a different opinion on Easter because you could play the hide and seek chocolate egg game. But whatever.
Well, and it's true that if you ban Valentine's Day candy from schools, all kids stop caring about Valentine's Day. I'm just saying, if we reenacted Prohibition, St. Patrick's Day would disappear from our cultural memory.
Yeah, and that turned out to be a terrible idea.
I'm not saying we should reenact Prohibition. Don't get me twisted. I'm just saying
you
that...
You can find Dusty O'Connell at Dusty O'Connell.
Oh, Lord.
we just got booze approved on Sunday, and you're trying to do Prohibition, Dusty. God.
Hey, man, I'm from North Dakota, where they shot down normal Sunday sales. Right as you were approving it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
those poor souls. Oh, we all have North Dakota ties, don't we?
I know.
Yeah, I spent 7 years there.
Yeah, and the blue laws there are still stricter than they are in Minnesota. God bless them. So no, I St. Patrick's Day dinner is fine. I'm not convinced that I'm with Eric on this one. If we're gonna go back to the actual question, I don't think anyone actually makes St. Patrick's Day dinner other than the actual Irish, which are really is that? I feel like
if you talk to food anthropologists, the dinner that's served on St. Patrick's Day is not that Irish.
Just like the holiday. So maybe it's perfect.
But so corned beef is Jewish.
Delicious?
It's a treatment. No, it's delicious. But it's a treatment of beef that New York Jews developed. It's not Irish. Corned beef isn't Irish. I don't care. St. Patrick's Day is not an Irish holiday; it's an Irish American holiday.
Yep, and it's based on drinking, so you're never going to get any complaints with me.
Well, as someone who, as Arif accurately pointed out, works in a bar, the last thing America needs is drinking holidays. Those are called Fridays.
It's way less than all of these other developed countries, man. Just chill out.
Yep.
Well, and that is actually my biggest problem with St. Patrick's Day, and to a lesser extent, New Year's Eve / New Year's Day, is that everybody who doesn't drink feels like it's their responsibility to go drink on these drinking holidays, and since they don't even experience drinking, they just
you're just inventing problems.
Fool. I'm not, okay.
Just
okay.
Just read the last question.
Okay.
And then let's finish the show.
All right.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. All right. This one is specifically for Eric. Can you confirm that Arif smells like lavender and lilacs?
This is another hoodie question, of course. I cannot confirm that because cyborgs do not have smell.
Oh, good answer.
Yep.
Answer.
I would like to think that you still smell the way that your house did when you were growing up, because Arshad still does. I don't know how he does it.
That doesn't actually make sense to me, given all the product. So, Eric, I don't know if you know, the reason I know Dusty is because he and my brother were really good friends. So he would come to my house a lot, and our house smelled like ethnic food because that's what we made. Because we define ethnic as not American.
It smells specifically like South Asian, like Bengali, like Indian style spices. So,
which to most people is pretty good. To me, whatever, because I grew up with it. I don't know. I don't think I do. I'm not really sure how Arshad does because he hasn't even been in a Bengali home for the past.
And that's what's so weird
years.
about it. But he just can't like it's in his blood.
Getting borderline racist. It's just the curry's in your blood, man.
I'm just telling you how he smells. He's a good person. He's done a lot of good for the world.
Or is it one of those things, Dusty, where you see him and you just the memories come back and you smell it in your mind?
I'm actually smelling it right now.
See, exactly. Just because you think about it. See, it's one of those.
I can't separate. No, it's true. All right.
Oh, I love the tangents on Norse code. That's my favorite part of listening to the show and being on it. We always finish somewhere 45 miles away from Viking football.
Well, everyone that's been on the show multiple times has learned to enjoy it, and I think after 4 years, we've finally browbeaten our listeners, or all the ones that actually hated have finally left. But the mailbag reflects people's enthusiasm to hear us go wildly off topic. In fact,
exactly.
I did an interview with a potential intern today, and I told them, I was the last question I'm going to ask you is the most important. And I said that before we even started recording, and then I almost forgot to ask him at the very end. I asked him the question, and his answer will shock and surprise you. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's secret Norse code business. But
okay.
Oh, okay.
But you're gonna
Do I? Or are you going to tell me later? Or
yeah. We'll deal with that off the air. But
okay.
But anyway, this will be something that we can all enjoy with this person should they get the thankless job of being interim host for the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, Norse Code, for which we have, I guess. Wow, for all the tangents, we're only an hour and a half. Good job, guys. You guys are
all right.
We got a semi-professional host and a very professional guest. Thank you so much for being on the show again, Eric. You are always a treat.
Always my pleasure to be on.
Glad you stayed up so late. I know you are still doing the Daily Norseman. Is there any particular thing you would like to plug alongside that?
Nope, that's just follow along on Twitter at Eric_J_Thompson. And, of course, as we get closer to the draft, my actual published articles will be ramping up. And, of course, any breaking news, any fun free agent signs, maybe by the time this goes up, we'll have a Latavius Murray signing to all complain about or celebrate, depending on which side of the ledger you fall on that.
Celebrate.
But, yep, just stay tuned to Daily Norseman. That's my one spot right now. And of course, I hop on all sorts of podcasts to be guests and pretend I'm good at this kind of stuff from time to time.
Well, all right. And Arif, do you have anything that's coming down the pipe that we should know about?
I mean, eventually, I'm going to pick up those prospect profiles and add athleticism to all of the scores. There's just like one last round of testing I have to do for one of the positions before I can like finalize it. But yeah, I'm going to do that. So here's actually something I'm kind of interested in doing. I'm going to make a fake big board that has nothing to do with reality. That's only built on production, age, and athleticism, and just see like where players rank if that's all you took into account. So you're going to get like some 7th round player first overall, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, that sounds like fun. Look forward to that.
You're so enthusiastic about it. I like it.
But it's so useless. I love it.
Well, it's the off season. That's a perfect time to post things like that.
And this is like one of the 2 dark times of the off season. There's like nothing happening now, and then like
right
after the draft.
Oh my god.
Yeah. All right, well, that's gonna do it for number 177. And Logan Reed writes in with an email formula suggestion. Only a little below average.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Really? I'm not...
Well, because it's a reference to the offensive line, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in reference to the vast improvement we hope to see from the worst offensive line ever, he writes.
Well, if our listeners think they can do better, they should send us suggestions for sign-offs.
For new formula sign-offs. Well, until then, this is Norse Code. Well, I don't want to say it because it makes it sound like the podcast is only a little below average.
Yeah, that's why it's funny.
Exactly.
Well, all right then. We'll be back next week with some more phenomenal digital multimedia content from the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of all 3 of us, I'm Dusty O'Connell. Only a little below average. We'll see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast.com. On behalf of James and Arif, my name is Dusty, and we all thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
I know, that is a heck of a sign-off right there.
The #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Only a little below average.
But if you think about it, it's really fitting. We're talking about the Vikings. Only a little below average. That's
This is the best Vikings team I've seen in years. They are a little below.
Just a little, yep. Only a little, not way below. Customarily way below.
That is perfect, especially for the current climate of Vikings.